Have you ever noticed how some people become restless, not when you argue back, but when you say nothing at all? Silence unsettles them, not because you are weak, but because you've stopped feeding their ego. In a world addicted to reactions, silence feels unnatural. We're taught to explain ourselves, to defend, to respond quickly, emotionally, endlessly. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that power begins the moment we reclaim control over our responses. This video is not about revenge. It's not about manipulation. It's about dignity. When you stay calm, grounded, and unmoved, certain people feel it immediately. Their ego starts to crack. Not because you attacked it, but because you withdrew your energy. Today, you'll learn 7 subtle signs that your silence is quietly dismantling someone's ego. You won't raise your voice, you won't prove a point. You'll simply remain centered, and that calm presence will speak louder than anything you could ever say, without saying anything. 1. They suddenly try to provoke a reaction. When someone's ego begins to feel threatened, the first thing it looks for is proof that it still has power. Not dominance, not respect, just a reaction. At first, it's subtle. A sarcastic comment slipped into a conversation. A joke that feels slightly off. A reminder of something you said or did long ago, brought up for no real reason. They're not trying to communicate. They're testing. Ego survives on feedback. It needs confirmation that it still matters, that it can still move you emotionally. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending, stop reacting the way you used to, something inside them becomes unsettled. So they poke, they prod, they provoke. From a Stoic perspective, this moment is revealing. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if you are disturbed by something external, the disturbance is not caused by the thing itself, but by your judgment of it. When you no longer offer that judgment out loud, the other person feels a loss of control. Notice the pattern. They may exaggerate their tone. They may challenge you in front of others. They may say things designed to trigger guilt, anger, or insecurity. None of it is accidental. This is not strength on their part. It is desperation. A calm person is difficult to dominate, and silence removes the emotional mirror the ego depends on. When you don't reflect their energy back to them, they're forced to sit with their own behavior. That's uncomfortable. The Stoic response here is not passive. It's deliberate. You stay present. You maintain neutral body language. You respond, if at all, with simplicity and restraint. No explanations, no emotional corrections, no effort to win. What happens next is predictable. If the provocation doesn't work, it often escalates. The comments get sharper, the timing more intentional. This is the ego making one last attempt to pull you back into the old dynamic where it felt superior. But every time you refuse to react, something shifts. The power imbalance reverses quietly. You're no longer playing defense. You're no longer available for emotional extraction. Stoicism never taught people to suppress anger out of fear. It taught them to observe it without surrendering to it. By choosing silence in moments of provocation, you're not avoiding conflict, you're demonstrating mastery. Eventually, the person either stops or exposes themselves further. Both outcomes work in your favor. Because you didn't argue, you didn't attack, you didn't chase control, you simply removed access. And that absence of reaction is often the first sign that someone realizes their ego no longer has a place to stand. 2. They start over-explaining themselves. When your silence takes effect, the next shift is often unexpected. They start talking more. Not to you, but around you. At first, it sounds harmless. Extra details. Long explanations for simple decisions. Stories that seem unnecessary, almost rehearsed. This is not confidence, it's compensation. An ego that feels secure doesn't need to justify itself. It doesn't rush to be understood. But when someone senses that your attention is withdrawn, their inner balance starts to wobble. They feel the absence, and they try to fill it with words. From a Stoic perspective, this moment reveals something important. People explain themselves excessively when they feel internally judged, even if no judgment is coming from you. Your silence creates a vacuum, and insecure egos hate empty space. They begin narrating their intentions, clarifying their motives, rewriting past events out loud, not because you asked, but because they need reassurance that they still make sense, that they still matter. Marcus Aurelius warned against wasting energy trying to manage how others see us. He understood that the need to be constantly understood is a form of dependence. When you stop offering verbal validation, that dependence becomes visible. Watch closely. They may say things like, "I just wanted to explain," or "People misunderstand me, but," or "Let me clarify what I meant." None of this is for clarity. It's for relief. Your calm presence forces them into self-exposure. They are speaking not to communicate, but to stabilize their self-image. And the more they speak, the more obvious it becomes. The Stoic response here is restraint without withdrawal. You listen without interrupting. You don't nod excessively. You don't reassure. You don't contradict. Silence in this moment is not emptiness. It's containment. When you don't rush to agree or disagree, the other person is left alone with their own narrative. They begin hearing themselves, and sometimes they don't like what they hear. This is where many people make a mistake. They feel uncomfortable with the imbalance and step in to smooth things over. They reassure. They say, "It's fine," or "I get it," just to ease the tension. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Not cruelty, but clarity. You're not responsible for stabilizing someone else's ego. When you remain grounded, something subtle happens. The over-explaining slows, or it intensifies to the point of self-exposure. Either way, the dynamic shifts. They realize they are speaking into space, and space is honest. An ego that depends on validation cannot survive prolonged silence. It either adapts or reveals its fragility. By saying nothing, you didn't dominate them. You didn't dismiss them. You didn't out-argue them. You simply refused to participate in the performance. And that quiet refusal is often when they begin to feel that something inside them is losing its grip. 3. They seek validation from others around you. When your silence no longer gives them feedback, the ego looks elsewhere. It scans the room. It looks for witnesses. It looks for allies. This is when they begin involving other people. They tell stories that subtly place you in the background. They repeat situations where they appear reasonable, generous, or misunderstood. They ask questions that aren't really questions, hoping someone else will confirm what you refuse to. This behavior is not about connection, it's about reassurance. An ego that feels stable doesn't need an audience. But when your silence removes their sense of superiority, they try to rebuild it socially. They want others to nod, to agree, to validate what you no longer react to. From a Stoic lens, this is a critical moment. Epictetus taught that people are disturbed not by events, but by the meanings they assign to them. When you stop assigning meaning through reaction, they rush to outsource that meaning to others. Watch how they behave in groups. They may exaggerate their confidence. They may speak louder than usual. They may subtly compare themselves to you without naming you directly. The goal is simple. If they can't feel superior through you, they'll try to feel superior through consensus. What makes this powerful is that you don't need to confront it. You don't need to defend yourself publicly. You don't need to correct the narrative. Stoicism is clear on this. Your character does not require witnesses. Your composure is not a performance. When you remain silent, something uncomfortable happens for them. They start noticing who is actually listening. They begin to feel the instability of borrowed validation, because approval from others is never as grounding as control over oneself. The more they seek reassurance, the more exposed their insecurity becomes. People sense it. Even if they don't say anything, the energy shifts. Your restraint does something subtle but profound. It removes you from the hierarchy they're trying to climb. You are no longer competing. You're no longer playing the same game. And when one person steps out of the game, it disrupts everyone still playing it. This is where ego feels most threatened, not by attack, but by irrelevance. The Stoic response here is quiet consistency. You don't change your behavior depending on the audience. You don't soften your presence. You don't sharpen it either. You stay the same. Over time, this creates contrast. Their neediness becomes louder. Your steadiness becomes clearer. And something important happens internally for them. They begin to feel unseen, not ignored, but unmirrored. Ego needs reflection to survive. It needs comparison. It needs reaction. When you deny all three, it starts grasping. You may notice awkward pauses when you enter a room. You may sense tension without words. That's the feeling of someone realizing that their usual tools no longer work on you. You didn't embarrass them. You didn't undermine them. You didn't compete. You simply stopped offering your energy as a reference point. And when validation has to be begged from others, the ego knows it has already lost ground. 4. They reframe you as cold or arrogant. When provocation fails, explanations fall flat, and borrowed validation feels weak, the ego changes strategy. It stops trying to pull you back. Instead, it tries to redefine you. Calm becomes cold. Composed becomes arrogant. Silent becomes difficult. This reframing is not an observation, it's a defense. When someone can no longer control your reactions, they attempt to control the story. Labeling is easier than self-reflection. If they can convince themselves that you are the problem, they don't have to face what your silence is revealing. From a Stoic perspective, this is predictable. Marcus Aurelius reminded us not to waste time worrying about how others interpret our character. He understood that misunderstanding is often the tax paid for inner discipline. Notice how the language changes. They may say, "You've changed." They may suggest you're distant, unfriendly, or full of yourself. Not because your behavior became hostile, but because it became unavailable. Your silence removes their access. And access to an insecure ego feels like entitlement. This is where many people break their own composure. They rush to clarify. They explain their intentions. They try to prove they are still kind, still open, still good. Stoicism advises restraint here for a reason. The moment you begin defending your character, you hand control back to the very ego you withdrew from. You turn inward discipline into outward justification. Silence in this phase is not about indifference. It's about alignment. You know who you are. You know your values. You know your behavior is consistent. That consistency is what eventually exposes the lie in the label. People who are truly arrogant announce themselves. They seek admiration. They demand attention. They react strongly when challenged. You're doing the opposite, and over time, others begin to notice the mismatch. Your actions don't support the accusation. Your calm doesn't fit the story being told. The label loses traction. What makes this uncomfortable for the other person is that labeling usually works. Most people panic when misunderstood. They scramble to fix their image. They negotiate their dignity for acceptance. When you don't do that, it unsettles them. Epictetus taught that if you want to improve, you must accept appearing foolish or misunderstood for a time. This moment is exactly that test. The ego expected you to react, to correct, to defend. When you don't, it has nowhere to go. So it repeats the label, sometimes louder, sometimes to different people, but each repetition weakens it, because words without reaction decay quickly. Your silence turns their accusation into an echo, and echoes eventually fade. You're not required to prove warmth to someone who benefits from your agitation. You're not obligated to soften yourself so others feel comfortable. Stoic strength is not about being liked. It's about being governed by reason, not reputation. When you remain steady while being mischaracterized, something breaks quietly inside the other person. They realize their usual leverage no longer works. And that realization is deeply uncomfortable for an ego that survives on control. You didn't correct the narrative. You didn't argue the label. You didn't explain yourself. You simply stayed who you were. And that steadiness, over time, tells the truth louder than any defense ever could. 5. They suddenly become extra nice. When labeling you doesn't work, the ego shifts again. Not toward confrontation, but toward charm. This is where things become confusing for many people. The same person who tested you, provoked you, or subtly disrespected your boundaries suddenly softens. They smile more. They offer favors. They check in. They act warm, almost overly so. This is not reconciliation. It's strategy. An insecure ego doesn't surrender easily. When force fails, it tries access. When tension fails, it tries comfort. The goal is not peace. The goal is to reopen the channel you quietly closed. From a Stoic perspective, this moment requires clarity. Seneca warned that not all kindness is virtuous. Sometimes it's simply a disguise worn by self-interest. Notice the timing. The friendliness appears only after your silence holds. Only after their previous tactics stop working. That's not coincidence. It's adaptation. They may compliment you in ways that feel slightly misplaced. They may offer help you didn't ask for. They may bring up shared memories, inside jokes, or moments meant to trigger familiarity. What they're really doing is checking one thing. Do they still have access? Ego prefers control through harmony when control through dominance fails. If they can make you relax your guard, even briefly, they regain influence. That's why this phase often feels pleasant on the surface and dangerous underneath. The Stoic response here is not suspicion, it's consistency. You don't become cold, you don't become warm, you remain unchanged. You acknowledge politeness without rewarding intrusion. You accept kindness without reopening boundaries. You stay respectful without becoming available. This balance is uncomfortable for the other person. They expected gratitude. They expected relief. They expected the dynamic to reset. When it doesn't, something subtle happens. Their friendliness starts to feel strained. The effort increases. The smiles last longer than necessary. The tone becomes slightly forced. That's the ego working overtime. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person should act in harmony with nature, not with appetite. In this moment, harmony means alignment with your values, not reacting to emotional bait even when it's pleasant. Many people break here. They mistake kindness for change. They assume the problem has resolved itself. They lower their guard out of hope, not reason. Stoicism doesn't teach cynicism, it teaches discernment. You don't reject goodwill, but you also don't forget patterns. If kindness comes without accountability, it's usually transactional. If warmth appears only when silence becomes firm, it's rarely genuine. By staying steady, you force clarity. Either the other person adjusts their behavior long-term, or the friendliness fades. Both outcomes reveal the truth. What makes this phase powerful is that you don't need to accuse or confront. You simply don't change, and that lack of change is felt. The ego realizes charm isn't restoring control. That access is not being granted simply because the tone softened. That politeness no longer buys influence. This is often when frustration leaks through the smile. A subtle impatience, a passive comment, a moment of visible disappointment. That's not about you. That's about loss. You didn't reject them. You didn't punish them. You didn't harden yourself. You just kept your boundaries intact. And when kindness fails to move you, the ego understands something uncomfortable. It can no longer reach you through force or through affection. That realization lands quietly, but it lands hard. 6. They begin testing your boundaries. Again, when charm doesn't reopen the door, the ego resorts to measurement, not confrontation, not friendliness, but testing. This phase is quieter than provocation, yet more revealing. They don't push hard, they push small. A comment slipped in casually. A joke that crosses a line just slightly. A request framed as harmless, even reasonable. They're not trying to upset you. They're checking something far more important. Have your boundaries weakened? An ego that feels control slipping will always test limits before accepting loss. It wants confirmation. It wants proof that your silence was temporary, not structural. From a Stoic perspective, boundaries are not declared through words. They're demonstrated through consistency. And this is where many people unknowingly give their power back. The test often looks innocent. They revisit a topic you stopped engaging with. They interrupt slightly. They assume familiarity that no longer exists. Each move is small enough to excuse, but deliberate enough to signal intent. The ego is asking a silent question. Can I still cross this line? What makes this moment critical is that the response must be calm, not corrective. Stoicism does not require explanation to enforce boundaries. It requires behavior that leaves no ambiguity. You don't need to react emotionally. You don't need to escalate. You don't need to warn. You simply don't comply. If the comment seeks reaction, you don't offer one. If the request seeks access, you decline without justification. If the joke tests respect, you let the silence do the work. This quiet refusal is uncomfortable for them, because there's no argument to win, no drama to lean on, no conflict to manipulate. They may try again. Sometimes more than once. Not because they're stubborn, but because the ego struggles to accept permanent limits. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you stop reacting to things outside your control. At this stage, your reaction is the boundary. Or, more accurately, your lack of reaction is. What often follows is frustration, a slight change in tone, a subtle impatience. They may accuse you of being distant again, or imply that you're making things awkward. That accusation is another test. If you rush to smooth it over, the boundary collapses. If you explain yourself, the door reopens. If you stay calm and unchanged, the line holds. Stoic discipline shows itself here, not through toughness, but through restraint. You are not trying to teach them a lesson. You are not trying to assert dominance. You are simply deciding what you allow access to. Over time, the testing slows. The attempts become less frequent. The ego begins to recognize that the old pathways are closed, and this recognition is painful. Because boundaries mean something final. They mean that control is no longer negotiated. They mean the dynamic has shifted permanently. Most people fear this moment. They worry about appearing cold or inflexible. Stoicism reframes it differently. A boundary is not punishment, it's clarity. When you hold it without emotion, the ego understands something it cannot argue with. Your silence is not a phase, it's a decision. And once that decision becomes undeniable, the ego has only two options: adapt to the new reality, or withdraw. Either way, your composure remains intact. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't draw a line in the sand with words. You didn't demand respect. You demonstrated it. And for an ego accustomed to control through reaction, that demonstration is deeply unsettling. 7. They become uncomfortable around you. This is the final shift. Not anger, not hostility, just discomfort. They grow quieter when you enter the room. Eye contact changes. Conversations feel slightly tense, even when nothing is said. There's no conflict on the surface, yet something feels off. That feeling is awareness. At this stage, the ego has run out of strategies. Provocation failed. Explanation didn't work. Validation from others felt hollow. Labels lost their power. Charm couldn't reopen access. Boundaries held firm. What remains is unease. From a Stoic perspective, this moment is deeply revealing. People feel uncomfortable not because you did something wrong, but because your presence no longer supports their self-image. Your silence has become a mirror they can't control. You are calm, you are consistent, you are unchanged, and that steadiness highlights their instability. They don't know how to behave around you anymore. The old scripts don't apply. The familiar dynamics no longer work. So they hesitate. This discomfort is not about tension between you. It's about tension within them. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person who is at peace with themselves is unmoved by the noise of others. At this stage, your peace exposes the noise they carry internally. You may notice subtle signs. They avoid sitting near you. They speak differently in your presence. They overthink simple interactions. Sometimes they withdraw altogether. This is not rejection. It's recalibration. An ego that relied on your reactions now has nothing to push against. No leverage, no resistance, no emotional reward. And without resistance, the ego loses its sense of importance. What matters here is that you don't mistake discomfort for danger. You don't rush to ease it. You don't soften yourself to make them comfortable again. Stoicism teaches that inner alignment often creates external tension. That tension is not something to fix. It's something to respect. You're not responsible for making others comfortable with your self-control. You're responsible for maintaining it. Over time, one of two things happens. They adapt and treat you with genuine respect, or they create distance to protect their ego. Both outcomes are honest. You didn't humiliate them. You didn't confront them. You didn't assert dominance. You simply stopped participating in a dynamic that required your emotional energy to survive. And that is why the discomfort feels different. It's quiet, it's internal, it lingers. Because on some level, they understand the truth. Your silence didn't attack their ego, it revealed it. And once something is revealed, it can never return to the comfort of illusion. Silence is often misunderstood. People think it's avoidance. They think it's a weakness. They think it means you've lost. Stoicism teaches something far more uncomfortable and far more powerful. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is a strength that no longer needs permission. Throughout this video, you didn't learn how to dominate others. You didn't learn how to humiliate, manipulate, or win arguments. You learned how the ego reacts when it no longer has access to your emotional energy. That distinction matters. When you stop reacting, explaining, proving, and defending, something fundamental shifts. The people who relied on your responses feel it immediately, not because you hurt them, but because you removed yourself from a dynamic that fed their sense of importance. Stoicism was never about defeating others. Marcus Aurelius never taught control as a weapon. He taught it as freedom. Freedom from provocation. Freedom from emotional extraction. Freedom from needing to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. If your silence made someone uncomfortable, that discomfort is information. It reveals where their ego was attached. It shows you where control once existed. And it confirms that your calm has weight. You're not required to fill every silence. You're not obligated to explain your growth. You are not responsible for maintaining dynamics that drain you. Silence, when chosen consciously, is a boundary, a filter, a form of self-respect. Some people will adapt. Some will distance themselves. Both outcomes are honest. What matters is that you remain aligned, calm, consistent, unmoved. Because the most stoic response is not to break someone else's ego. It is to stop sacrificing your own peace to protect it. If this message resonated, Reflect on where silence could serve you better than reaction. Not to punish, not to perform, but to preserve your inner order. That is Stoic strength.